This lecture we're going to talk about the socio-emotional development in infancy. So what are emotions? Basically, emotion is a feeling or affect that occurs when a person is in a state or an interaction that is important to him or her, especially to his or her well-being. There are biological and environmental influences on emotions. Certain brain regions play a role in emotions, and also relationships and culture provide diversity in emotional experiences. Grolnick and Bridges basically they studied 4 behaviors that toddlers typically use to regulate their negative affective responses. The modulating behaviors they examined included symbolic reassurance. So they repeated phrases like "I'm a big girl" or "Mommy will be back later." Also shifting attention, so they looked away. High involvement in toy play. They also examined self-soothing comfort, so that would be like thumb sucking, hair stroking, or seeking comfort contact from the caregiver, and also maintaining focus on the stressful situation, like active searching for the mother. Grolnick assessed these behaviors both during the separation from the mother and when faced with a delay in receiving a desirable gift or present or something that they wanted. There were individual differences that were seen in that some toddlers were very upset by both the situations, whereas others were only mildly upset or distressed. Active engagement with toys was a very effective method for coping with the distressed toddler and was used the most when an adult was present. The children who used active involvement in toy play as a regulatory event were the least distressed. The ones who maintained focus on the stressful situation continued to be the most upset. In his it's important to note that the researchers acknowledge that these findings do not elucidate the causal relations between coping strategy and emotional expressiveness. So I want you to just take a look at the children that I'm going to show you, and just kind of think about what emotion they're expressing. And emotions can even be found in animals. So this cat kind of looks like he's evil, or he's up to no good, or he's angry, or something like that. Early emotions are basically the primary and self-conscious emotions. The primary emotions are present in humans and in animals. And those primary emotions include things like emotions like surprise, an interest in something, joy, being happy, or angry, being mad, sadness, fear, fearfulness, disgust. And just to keep in mind that fear is one of a baby's earliest emotions that they experience. Self-conscious emotions actually require self-awareness, and that involves consciousness and a sense of me. So these aren't primary emotions that both animals and humans encompass, and these aren't things that we are inherently born with. These are the types of emotions that we kind of require after a period of time, and they include emotions like jealousy, empathy, meaning a feeling or sympathy for another individual, embarrassment, pride, shame, and guilt. So when you're thinking about emotions, babies are probably crying a lot, and that actually signifies their emotion. Their cries actually mean different things. So you hear a baby crying, you probably think, oh gosh, what does this baby want? I have no idea. But actually, there are different types of cries that can alert you as to what the baby is needing or feeling. And crying is the most important mechanism that newborns have for communicating with their world. They can't really talk, they can't really write, they can't use sign language, so that's their means of communicating. Um, and there's three different types of cries. There's the basic cry, and that's a rhythmic pattern consisting of a cry followed by a briefer silence, then a shorter whistle that's higher pitched, then another brief rest before the actual main cry. Then you have the anger cry, and that's a variation of the basic cry in which more excess air is forced through the vocal cords. And then you also have a pain cry, and that's a sudden, long, initial loud cry followed by breath holding, and that's the most intense cry. So it might be difficult for you to just kind of know when you hear a cry, a baby cry. You probably have to hear all the different types of cries to kind of signify and figure out which one is which. So this is what physical distress and pain looks like in a baby. Their brows will lower and they get drawn together. They have a bulge between their brows. Their eyes are tightly closed. Their cheeks are raised. Their nose is broad and bulging, and their mouth is open and squarish. And babies can cry for all types of reasons. One reason is separation protest, and that's when the caregiver leaves. That's due to some type of anxiety about being separated from their caregiver, and that typically happens or peaks at about 15 months for United States infants. There are cultural variations to that, but generally that's what it looks like. Caregivers or parents, their actions will influence the infant's neurobiological regulation of emotion. So caregivers can do different things to help or change their baby's emotion. Soothing will reduce the level of stress a baby is experiencing. It physically reduces stress hormones. And swaddling. Infants gradually learn how to minimize the intensity of emotional reactions. So there's individual differences in behavioral styles, emotions, and characteristic ways that children or infants respond, and that can be considered what their temperament is. Some people might say it's their mood. And then, so Chess and Thomas classify temperament into these different categories. You have the easy child, and generally a child that's easy will have a positive mood. They'll be happy. They have regular routines for doing things like going to sleep, waking up, watching TV. They're happy while they're watching TV, and then maybe they might be sad for regular reasons like they have to go to sleep or something like that. They also adapt to new experiences very easily, and that's the easy child. Then you have the difficult child, and these children have a general negative mood. They will tend to cry frequently, and they have irregular daily routines. So they might wake up and be awake in the middle of the night and be irritable and crying, and they're very slow to accept change. So for example, if the baby has a new crib or there's going to be a new sibling coming along. The difficult child will have a more they'll be slower to accept that change and have a more negative mood about it. Then there's the slow to warm up child, and these children will have a low activity level. They're somewhat negative and they have a low intensity of mood. So then you have the unclassified children, and they basically do not fall into any of these categories. So birth to 1 year old, which is infancy, is Erikson's first stage, called trust versus mistrust. And we did speak about this in chapter 1. This is where Erikson believed the first year is characterized by either trust or mistrust. As far as social orientation, by 2 to 3 months, infants respond more positively to people than they do to objects or toys or things like that. And they conducted this experiment where a mother denied her baby attention for a short period of time. And what they found with that experiment, it's called the still face paradigm, is that it basically shows the importance of a caregiver's emotional responsiveness to the baby. When the mother denied her baby attention for that short period of time, the baby would cry, be irritable, get frustrated. So what that experiment showed is that unemotional caregiving responses can cause a negative reaction to a child or a baby. So attachment is a close emotional bond between two people, and there are different views on attachment. Attachment's not just an important part of infant and early childhood development. Our attachment relationship with our primary caregivers is related to later childhood and adolescent development in several domains. Elaine Castle and Douglas Bernstein, they studied crime as a developmental event. And they have written about a connection between temperament and attachment and the development of criminal behavior. And what they found was basically infants whose temperaments facilitate the development of secure attachment tend to become children who are socially and emotionally competent. And they become cooperative, enthusiastic, good at problem solving, they're compliant and controlled, and they're also popular and playful. So those are the infants that have a secure attachment. On the other hand, infants whose temperaments engender fussiness or overactivity and a tendency not to respond to parents' attempts to comfort them are likely to become children who have conflict and are rejected by their peers, and it leads to low self-esteem and things like truancy or skipping school and eventually delinquency. Inherited temperamental patterns that are associated with insecure attachment and that are not altered by counteracting parental influences appear to at least increase the probability of child behaviors that set off a chain of negative reactions and further misbehavior that often leads to aggression, violence, and crime. But connectedness to parents, meaning feelings of warmth, love, and caring from parents, is a significant factor in protecting adolescents from engaging in substance abuse and violence. This is according to conclusions based on surveys and interviews. John Bowlby was a psychoanalyst just like Sigmund Freud and believed that mental health and behavioral problems could be attributed to early childhood. Bowlby's evolutionary theory of attachment suggests that children come into the world biologically pre-programmed to form attachments with others because this will help them to survive. During the evolution of the human species, it would have been the babies who stayed close to their mothers who would have survived to have children of their own. And Bowlby hypothesized that both infants and mothers have evolved a biological need to stay in contact with each other. Although Bowlby did not rule out the possibility of other attachment figures for a child, he did believe that there should be a primary bond which was more important than any other, usually being the mother. Bowlby claimed that mothering is almost useless if it's delayed until after 2.5 to 3 years of a child being born for most children, and if it's delayed till after, also if it's delayed after 12 months, that's where the critical period lies. Bowlby's maternal deprivation is, however, it's supported by Harlow's research that he's done with monkeys. And we'll talk about that in the next slide, but basically Bowlby came up with these different attachment styles to describe children or individuals, and we have the securely attached style, and that's where children are going to be happy. Generally, if a parent leaves or caregiver leaves, they're going to be happy to see the caregiver return. And that's where 70% of infants fall into that category. Then there's the insecure or avoidant attachment style, and that's basically children that have very little interest in their caregivers, and they'll cry. They'll actually cry when their caregivers leave the room. But then the difference between securely attached and insecurely attached is that when the parents come back, for the insecurely attached children, they don't seem to be pleased. They'll often turn away from their caregivers, and it'll almost seem like they're angry, even though the reason that they were upset initially is because the caregiver was leaving. So the idea that the caregiver comes back should actually make the child happy. And about 20% of infants fall into that category. So then there's also insecure resistant attachment, and that's these type of children initially don't want the caregiver to explore their room or wherever they're at, and then just like the insecure or avoidant attachment style, they'll cry when the caregiver leaves. But then when they return, they seem like they want to be consoled, and it looks like they do, but they will resist that the consolation of, when the parent comes back and tries to, hug them or say it's going to be okay, they will resist wanting to be consoled. And they also seem very angry, and about 10% of infants fall into that category. Then there's the insecure disorganized attachment style, and these children are usually those that have been associated with child abuse from their caregivers, or if their caregiver has some kind of mental illness. It's not in every case that you find that, but in a lot of cases that's the reason that children are insecure or disorganized. They have extreme fearfulness of their caregiver, so they're actually scared of their mother or father. They have disorganized and disoriented behaviors. So it almost seems like they're dazed, or in a daze, like they're just confused and fearful. Harry Harlow is a well-known experimenter that conducted experiments between 1957 and 1963 in his laboratory at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Basically what Harlow did was he removed baby rhesus monkeys from their mothers and arranged them to be raised by two kinds of surrogate monkey mother machines. So both of the machines were equipped to dispense milk so that the monkeys could be fed. One of the devices was made out of a bare mesh wire, and the other was made from wire and covered with a soft terry cloth. He later modified the experiment by separating the infants into two groups, giving them no choice between the two types of mothers. The studies were motivated by some of John Bowlby's experiments. In 1953, Harlow's colleagues, James Robertson, produced a short and kind of controversial documentary titled "A 2-Year-Old Goes to Hospital," and basically that demonstrated the almost immediate effects of maternal separation. Bowlby's report, along with Robertson's film, demonstrated the importance of the primary caregiver in human and non-human primate development. In Harlow's classic experiment, two groups of baby rhesus monkeys were removed from their mothers. In the first group, a terry cloth mother provided no food, while a wire mother did, in the form of an attached baby bottle containing milk. In the second group, a terry cloth mother provided food, but the wire mother did not. It was found that the young monkeys clung to the terry cloth mother whether or not it provided them with food, and also the young monkeys chose the wire surrogate only when it provided food. Whenever a frightening stimulus was brought into the cage, the monkeys ran to the cloth mother for protection and comfort, no matter which mother provided them with the food. But that response did decrease as the monkeys grew older. When the monkeys were placed in an unfamiliar room with the cloth surrogate, they clung to it until they felt secure enough to explore. And once they began to explore, they occasionally returned to the cloth mother for comfort. Monkeys placed in an unfamiliar room without their cloth mothers acted very differently. They froze in fear, they cried, they crouched down or sucked their thumbs. Some of them even ran from object to object, kind of searching for the cloth mother as they cried and screamed. Monkeys placed in the situation with their wire mothers exhibited the same behavior as the monkeys with no mother. Once the monkeys reached an age where they could eat solid foods, they were separated from their cloth mothers for 3 days. When they were reunited with their mothers, they clung to them and did not venture off to explore as they had in the previous situations. Harlow concluded from that the need for contact comfort was stronger than the need to explore. The study found that monkeys who were raised with either a wire mother or a cloth mother gained weight at the same rate. However, the monkeys that had only a wire mother, they had trouble digesting milk, and they also suffered from stomach issues like diarrhea more frequently. Harlow's interpretation of this behavior, which is still widely accepted, was that a lack of contact comfort is psychologically stressful to the monkeys. Feeding was thought to be the most important factor in the formation of a mother-child bond. Harlow concluded, though, that nursing actually strengthened the mother bond because of the intimate body contact that it provided. And he described his experiments as the study of love. He also believed that contact comfort could be provided by either mother or father. There are critics of Harlow's research, and basically what those critics state is that clinging is a matter of survival in young monkeys, but not actually in humans. And when it's applied to humans, it's overestimated by the importance of contact comfort, and it's underestimated of the importance of nursing in humans. Research reviewed illustrates that father love is influential in children's psychological well-being and health, and in an array of psychological and behavioral problems. Historically, the cultural construction of fatherhood had two main components. The first component or emphasis was that fathers were incapable of competent child rearing, and that they were basically biologically unsuited for the job. The second component, or emphasis, was that father's influence was not important or peripheral at best. These cultural views influenced the scientific community as well. Behavioral science researchers virtually ignored the role of fathers in children's development for the first 7 decades of the 20th century. More recently, researchers have attempted to better understand the influence of father love on children's development. One researcher named Ronner defines father love in terms of parental acceptance and rejection. Acceptance involves real and perceived feelings and behaviors of nurturance, affection, and support. And rejection involves the absence or withdrawal of these real and perceived feelings and behaviors. Rohner reviewed research that highlights the relationship between father love and offspring development. Gender role development research has found that the masculinity of fathers per se did not influence the masculinity of their sons. They also found that cultural sex role standards were more influential than the masculinity of the fathers when the father-son relationships were warm. The higher the quality of the father-child relationship, not just the amount of time a father spends with his child, the more cognitively and socially competent, less gendered stereotypic, more empathetic, and more psychologically healthy the children were. Research also found that perceived paternal love and caring was predictive of children's life satisfaction. And that was in a national sample of about 640 children aged 12 to 16 years old who lived in two-parent families. Fathers may be particularly influential in the development of some mental illnesses like depression, conduct disorders, aggression, and also substance abuse, or as far as drug and alcohol use and abuse. There was a national sample that found that perceived closeness of fathers contributed above and beyond the perceived closeness of mothers to adult children's happiness, their life satisfaction, and also their psychological well-being. Father-child conflict, but not mother-child conflict, was positively associated with adolescent depression. Research also found that when mothers were high in acceptance, the acceptance of fathers made an enormous difference. So low father acceptance scores were associated with children with poor cognitive competence, and higher father acceptance scores were associated with children with significantly better cognitive competence. Daughter's self-esteem was best predicted by mother's general support and father's physical affection, whereas son's self-esteem was best predicted by mother's companionship and father's sustained contact. Paternal nurturance was positively correlated with boys' IQ scores, but not girls' IQ scores. So that's some interesting research. This is a movie suggestion that's related to today's lecture, and it's a film called Clara's Heart from 1988, where basically Clara is a poor woman hired to be a housekeeper to a couple in a deteriorating marriage. She and her son David develop a close bond, opening his eyes and heart to new experiences. So you can probably find this at any local video rental store. And here are some website suggestions related to the lecture. We have attachment research, cultural differences, infant, child, and adult temperament, infant studies, the Institute for the Study of Child Development, a National Center for Children in Poverty, National Care Information Center, National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, and also Parenthood. So these are some websites, if you're interested in today's lecture, that you can go to and find out some more information.